are these people?
Collin, do you know the classic British television show Mitchell and Webb? Yes, Mitchell and
I
Webb.
actually do not.
Okay.
I do not actually.
You could guess by
So
this classic meme, "Are we the baddies?" what that might entail with his hat and whatnot, right? But I found it fitting
mhm.
with the story from Kit Klarenberg titled, "I Felt Like a Nazi. Zionists Admit Genocide." Okay? This isn't what Elon wrote in his diary, completely different story. Um, this is, which I wish I could find a tweet I said that said something along the lines of like, uh, I don't trust the crocodile tears of these kind of people, and I don't either, but
Right.
it at least is indicative of things. So Klarenberg writes on December 23rd, 2024, Israel's Haaretz published an extraordinary investigation into the impact of the Zionist occupation force brutality on the mental health of its own militants, specifically moral injury, whatever that means, incurred by Tel Aviv's soldiers while perpetrating unabashed genocide in Gaza. While at significant pains throughout to paint Israelis as the ultimate victims of the 21st century Holocaust they are committing, the outlet's little notice reporting offered extensive, unprecedented insight into routine horrors casually meted out for Palestinians by the entity before and after October 7th. The article's author, along with a ZOF social welfare officer, decades prior, conducted academic research into why Tel Aviv soldiers regularly commit the most sadistic atrocities imaginable against innocent Palestinians. They follow the First Intifada, 1987-1993, during which the entity brutally cracked down upon righteous Palestinian resistance to Israel's illegal, immoral occupation of their historic lands. The pair's joint research effort provided a rich yield of first-hand evidence of Zionist cruelty as ZOF soldiers candidly opened up to them. Okay? So, the pair identified separate groups of ZOF soldiers based on personality traits. First and foremost was a ruthless and callous faction who committed the most severe atrocities and viewed brutality as an expression of strength and masculinity. The power they felt serving in Israel's genocidal military was, quote, intoxicating. One boastfully described how he had no problem brutalizing and murdering women, citing how he'd kicked a Palestinian female so hard her bones in her groin broke and she can't have children today. Quote, it's like a drug, you
Damn.
feel like you are the law. You make the rules as if from the moment you leave the place called Israel and enter the strip, you are God. So that's
Sounds like
uh,
our police who wear the badge.
uh-huh.
Same shit.
Sounds like we got a lot of complexes involved here too. But meanwhile, another ZOF militant shot an Arab 4 times in the back from a distance of just 10 meters and got away with a self-defense claim. This was, the killer admitted, cold-blooded murder, and we did things like that every day. Another recalled how a young Palestinian was walking down a street calmly minding their own business when Zionist forces opened fire. Bang, a bullet in the stomach, and he was dying on the sidewalk. Israeli operatives then drove away indifferently to their victim. Per Haaretz, these soldiers were remorseless and did not report moral injury. Nonetheless, a few of the genocidal war criminals involved were convicted by military courts for their horrendous actions, which left them feeling bitter and betrayed. Those murderers who got away with it unpunished were tacitly assisted by a small, ideologically violent group that supported their brutality despite not taking part in the killings directly. They believed in Jewish supremacy and were derogatory towards Arabs, so determinedly turned a blind eye. Meanwhile, a large group of ZOF soldiers with no prior inclination to violence became callous and inhuman to the influence of their superiors and the norms of their unit. Quote, I felt like a Nazi. It looked exactly like we were actually the Nazis and they were the Jews. One member of this contingent testified another bore witness to how a new commander, during their first patrol together in the early hours of the morning, hideously mutilated a defenseless Palestinian child. There's not a soul in the streets, just a little 4-year-old boy playing in the sand in his yard. The commander suddenly starts running, grabs the boy, and breaks his arm at the elbow and his leg. Stepped on his stomach 3 times and left. We all stood there with our mouths open. He told me, these kids need to be killed from the day they are born. When a commander does that, it becomes legit. Still, there were some CUF conscripts who opposed the influence of callous and ideological groups on the culture of the Zionist entity's military, who bravely took a moral stand and went on to report the atrocities they witnessed, if not participated in directly. Despite being initially intimidated by brutal commanders, they blew the whistles. The reward was to be severely harassed and ostracized by Zionist entity authorities. One truth teller was permanently discharged for their disclosures. Traumatized and depressed, they subsequently fled Israel. Another whistleblower who dared make clear his personal opposition to official orders that amounted to flattening Gaza and necessitated crimes against humanity suffered severe social ostracism, I bet, for his refusal to comply and willingness to publicize the frightful objectives with which he was tasked. He was recently bullied and pressured out of his unit and returned back to civilian life, mentally crushed. Such ill treatment is only to be expected given the ZOF's wider institutional culture and the innately genocidal nature of the putrid ideology of Zionism. So here's a little clip, right? Brothers of Israeli soldiers said he entered Gaza for revenge on women and children. This has been played a bunch, so I'm not going to play it here, but feel free to go look it up. I mean, it's just them essentially crying about taking part in genocide, you know?
Right.
So, as Haaretz notes, multiple ZOF war criminals gave jubilant eulogies at the October 2024 funeral of Shuvael ben Natan, an entity militant neutralized during Tel Aviv's invasion of Lebanon that month. One bragged their fallen comrade entered Gaza to take revenge, while another exultantly recounted how ben Natan murdered a 40-year-old Palestinian harvesting olives with his children in the West Bank. Others nostalgically recalled how their deceased friend boosted morale in Gaza by setting a home on fire without approval. Just in case you
Jesus.
wondered where the problems were, Ben Natan's fellow war criminals were psychotically used the occasion of his funeral to profess their commitment to continue with arson and revenge in Gaza, Lebanon, and the West Bank. We see such sickening scenes playing out in real time today. Meanwhile, other comparable, if not worse, Zionist atrocities are well hidden from public view, perpetrated in mass in detention facilities such as Sid Taman. Haaretz refers to the severe sexual abuse to which Palestinian inmates are subjected at the site as a microcosm of brutalization in the current war, right? Which we talked about quite a bit. But 36 ongoing investigations into deaths of the Palestinian Sid Taman detainees since October 7th. Anonymous soldiers consulted by the outlet amply testified to how a discourse of hatred and revenge normalized the abuse at said facility. So, the included harsh arbitrary violence on a frequent basis, humiliation and degradation, deliberate starvation, and other abusive practices. A young student called up for ZOF duty who witnessed the savagery of Sid Taman firsthand, referred to a profusion of sadistic people there who enjoy causing suffering to others. They stated it was most disturbing to see how easily and quickly ordinary people can detach themselves and not see the reality right in front of their eyes when they are in a difficult and shocking human situation. Someone's going to let me know the medical study that was done, very similar to this, in the chats, I'm sure, where people were given a lot of power to cause pain over subjects. So that's a thing. Someone will let me know what that one was. A reservist doctor posted said a man echoed their comments, referring to total dehumanization throughout the site. Strikingly, though, their statement indicated intimate personal complicity in this horrendous acts perpetrated against innocent Palestinian detainees there, in the horrendous acts perpetuated against innocent Palestinians, about which their co-workers were so distressed. The doctor's evident lack of remorse over their personal maltreatment of captives was writ unambiguously large. They laconically justified their actions due to normalization of horrific abuse at the detention facility. So I think I've read this before. You don't really treat them as if they're human beings. The hardest thing for me is what I didn't feel. It bothers me that it didn't bother me. Another ZOS reservist posted there, described as restrained by Haaretz, was said to have maintained her standards morally by escaping the facility. She claimed to have been scarred by widespread dehumanization and dangerous attitudes she encountered there. Her experiences were so traumatic, she managed to be discharged from duty with a psychiatrist's help. More widely, such perspectives, she lamented, have become more normal in our society. Haaretz concurs, noting government officials routinely engage in rhetoric of hatred and revenge. So, ain't just Netanyahu, is it? It's a whole bunch of
Mm-hmm.
folks. So, the open state-level encouragement of wanton slaughter, incontrovertible proof for the Zionist entity's genocidal intent, is coupled with a weakening of Israel's civilian and military justice systems. Documentation testifying monstrous acts of militants is voluminous. Frequently, the gleeful film themselves abusive and killing captives, put it up on TikTok no less, shooting Palestinians, waving white flags, massacring women and children, looting abandoned homes, wantonly destroying abandoned property, and more. Despite this wealth of evidence, though, official investigations into ZOF abuses, let alone prosecutions, have been minuscule. Mainstream news outlets are committed to a conspiracy of silence on the genocide. Distancing, evasive language, omission, and other duplicitous chicanery is systematically employed to downplay or outright justify the entity's ferocious erasure of the Palestinian people. The disclosures and condemnation of the Haaretz probe would never appear in the Western media. Yet
Who
it
are
is
these
clear that its
people?
author believes ZOF abuses to be fundamentally abhorrent and heretical, the result of corrupting influence of callous and ideological violent soldiers. Appreciate the $20 from Sean. Always useful.
Thank you, Sean. Thank
Yeah.
you.
In reality, atrocities are and always have been hardwired into the ZOF. After all, Zionism is dependent on ethnic cleansing, population displacement, and land theft. Man, almost sounds very familiar to what MLK was talking about in our first segment. Its military will therefore invariably act accordingly. Partition of Palestine was first proposed by British October 1937 Peel Commission. Many Zionists were angry that the portion of Palestinian territory granted to them was too small. However, Ben Gurion, widely considered the father of Israel and its first prime minister, robustly dismissed their concerns. End quote. It does not hurt our feelings that by this acquisition we are not in possession of the whole land. This increase in possession is of consequence not only in itself, but because through it we increase our strength. And every increase in strength comes in the possession of the land as a whole. The establishment of a state, even if only on a portion of the land, is a powerful boost to our historical endeavors to liberate the entire country. So it doesn't sound like a two-state, does it?
Nope.
Thoughts?
I I am baffled at the type of culture where people, and again, the average age, I think, of an IDF official is like 19, 20. Like, I don't understand how a culture can propagandize children
Yeah.
to where they feel justified, at least in this degree, to kill other people. Like, I, I mean, I know it. I get it. Like, we see this throughout history. Like, so but it's still kind of fascinating to me that how, yeah, explain that science, how you can do that. Like, that's the
Yeah.
thing I think that I'm kind of unsettled by. It's the idea of like, you okay with, like, I can hate you, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily have the mind or the will, mostly the will, to kill you. So I don't get it. Like, I, I really don't get it. But it kind of slaps in the face of people who say, and this is my issue, it's like, oh, we're deserving of the land and all this kind of stuff, like it's rightfully ours. So that means you're justified. So that gives you the justification to kill the people who have been living there. Like, make that make sense. Like, that's the thing that people don't necessarily talk about. It's the idea of like, and again, this is on the basis of religion, quote unquote. Like, manifest destiny much, anyone? Like, you still feel so justified in having this land that you're willing to kill over it. Like,
Yeah.
and any Jewish American who's not able to make that connection, I think, is either dissonance or just, I don't want to think it's ignorance, because you should be able to make the connection that if you're strongly calling out, white settlers for doing that to the Native Americans, then why aren't you doing that among Israelis who, and I'll argue maybe even Jewish people who might agree with this, that it's okay to do that to Palestinians.
So the experiments I were talking about was the Milgram experiment and the Stanford prison experiment. Both were things people should look up. Um, you know, those were essentially in the same thing. Psychological study where students were randomly assigned to be prisoners or guards, right? And the ones with power became pretty terrible people. Um, so, and then the other one, the Milgram, is a series of social psychology experiments where participants were instructed to shock other participants, right? Um, and it measured the level of shock that the participants was willing to deliver. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, but they nonetheless continued to follow orders. Like if they told them to shock them, they shocked them, right? Regardless of what was happening, you know? So, and only a few people were like, no, I'm not doing that, you know? So,
Right.
but that's what this reminds me of. This is classic. We were following orders. It don't get you off the hook if I remember some of those trials. So,
Right. But
you know,
some orders are meant to be broken, in my opinion. So,
yes, especially by ethical
especially,
people.
I mean, for me, at least at the cost of human. Now it depends on the circumstance, but
Yeah,
but again, I just don't see like the group. I don't get that group think in this, that that people are justified or feel that they're
yeah,
justified in order to do something like that, just because I was ordered to.
right,
So
yeah. And usually there's a lot more going on with that when in regards to things like this. But yeah, it definitely uh, is part of that. People can disassociate that pretty easy. But talking about these things is why we're demonetized. You can scan that QR code on your screen, go in the description below and find the link, ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork. If you're in that live chat, you can put !donate, and did like Sean did and hook us up with some dollary dues. We appreciate it. But if you can't do that, it's very easy. We just ask for the statement that supposedly helps us fight suppression, liking and subscribing, hitting the share button, sending this to your friends, and leaving comments that we do read, all supposedly help. So, you know, this is brought to you by viewers such as yourselves. So, you know, do the work. But anyway, thanks for watching.